Do you ever have that moment where some of your old, more petty and maybe vindictive parts of you come out? Like, when you were younger and you weren't as mature and wise as you are in midlife, things bothered you. And if they bothered you enough, you might have nitpicked at people about them. Or maybe even into midlife, you're still doing this. Well, I don't know. Maybe you're still doing it in midlife. Maybe it's something that's resurged back. But I have a story today of just a recent time where that came up for me. Sometimes our growth and wisdom doesn't mean that we don't get triggered, and it doesn't mean that we don't have to have a moment of maybe being a little bit petty from time to time. How do you handle that? How do you come back from that? Because certainly it might not be in an alignment with who you want to be out in the world. But it just happens. It happens to the best of us. And if you want to hear a little bit about my story, then keep listening. Welcome. You're listening to The Centered Midlife, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Welcome back to The Centered Midlife. It's been a few weeks. I'm sorry, it's summer and I moved, and yeah, those are my excuses. It's summer and I moved. I have a million projects. If you're watching this on YouTube or you see the video on Spotify, you will see behind me several beautiful samples of paint on my wall because I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do my board and batten. And I think that the board actually will be about that high. Yeah, it actually will. There'll be wallpaper above it, but I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how far away I do the images so that you can see all the beauty if you're the persons that watch this on YouTube or Spotify. For those of you just listening, sorry, that was boring. But that's kind of what my life is full of, is buying power tools off Facebook Marketplace and pretending like I'm going to be the best remodeler, but I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to pull all of this off. We'll see. We'll see. So, to the story. This will be short and sweet. Maybe not, but I recently saw on Facebook an individual that I haven't talked to them in years, to be honest. But if you have enough people in common, you still might see them in the algorithms come up from time to time. And so this person came up, and they have a kid that is entering into high school. So they're kind of in the heat of finishing out the summer, and then they're going to have to start preparation for August, start in high school. And I remember this child being just itty bitty teeny weeny. Like, I don't remember when I met the family. I didn't know the family when this kiddo was a baby, but probably at least like second or third grade might have been what this kid was at when I first met them. And I was really close with the family for a while. Actually, I should say I and my ex-husband were really close. And then during my divorce from my ex-husband, that relationship dissolved, right? And that happens. It just, sometimes in the divorce, you don't get the friends. Like, that's just, it slices down the middle, and people don't get pulled both ways. Well, this particular couple, that really burned for me. And I think one of the main reasons that burned was I was so sad, disappointed, I guess, that they decided to listen to a narrative about what my divorce meant that was not true. It was not my truth, right? And I don't think it was an accurate truth of the situation for either me or my ex-husband. But it really burned. Like they just kind of snubbed me after the divorce. And I kind of heard through the grapevine some really non-generous things, very ungenerous things, I should say, that they thought of me, that they thought, I had been manipulating them into helping me with stuff after the divorce, because legitimately I had to move out of a house and, put stuff in storage and then take stuff from storage and move into another house. I'm sure you've all heard it, right? Like my last podcast I shared, like this home that I'm sitting in with the paint samples. Like this is one of the first times I can remember that I just wanted to move into a space, that I was really excited about it. And it wasn't clouded by anything else. I've certainly had other houses that I really adored and loved. But like, one of them was in North Minneapolis. And I remember buying that house just after my mom died, right? Before my dad died. I remember the summer following moving in because my parents died about 9 months apart. Then my dad died. And so like the experience in that house, while it was gorgeous and it was one of my favorite places architecturally and location wise and all of those things, it was also imprinted with that time in my life that was really difficult. I also had a relationship that dissolved during that time that needed to. Boyfriend that was not great at all. But when I was going through stuff with my mom as her health was failing before she passed, I just didn't have it in me to break up with him, to be honest. So I didn't do that till after she passed. So there's just like layers and layers of things that were happening in the context of my life that imprinted on that space. This space that I'm presently in, not the case. Like I am totally owning midlife and I'm having that centered midlife and I'm making one choice after another. But the other day I was watching, on Facebook, kind of this stuff unfold while this person was talking about not feeling ready. This is their oldest child, not feeling ready, that this child is going off to high school, not feeling like, it just seems surreal that it's gone that fast. But sometimes the minutes are long, and the days are short, right? Like the hours long, the days are short. I can't remember how that saying goes. But with kids, day to day, sometimes it's a slog for real. If you chose parenting in your life, you would understand that. But you also, if you have children that are aging, and if you're a woman in midlife, most likely you do, you also realize boom, it goes by. Boom, it goes by. Just decades of our life seem to swim by quite fast. And then you're reflecting oh my gosh, I missed that stage where they were like this and littler. So I'm reading all of this stuff and it was really moving. I don't ever actually interact with this person online. I just kind of am a voyeur in the background because it comes up in my algorithm. But there was this pang at the time as I'm reading it. And here's why. Here is why. So again, I was really close with this family, this couple and their children, and thought I was understood, right? Thought that I had a connection with them. After going through my divorce, after having some very ungenerous characterizations of myself that I heard through the grapevine that these people thought, and then they just atrophied, totally stopped reaching out, totally atrophied from me. That was painful. That was like getting dumped again in a icky way for me. And so part of the pang is that, but a bigger part of the pang is that my son was entering high school when I divorced my second husband, right? So at that time, because I was in the flux of divorcing and had a 3-year-old at home, was trying to figure out where we were going to live. And, I split in the summer months with my ex. And so it was just before the school year. And, we didn't know if I was going to find a place by the time the school year started. The consensus between my son and I and his dad is my son really wanted to move in with his dad. He had a solid place, a house, it was in the school district, all the things, right? So because of that, he chose to stay there for all of his high school career. But like at one of the most difficult times in my life, the thing that probably was the most important in my life, my kids, my son, quickly diverged into a storyline that I had not prepared myself for at all, right? So I was already going to be grieving like this person who I saw write eloquently that, the kid is getting older, going to high school, going to embark on a bunch of stuff, not going to need me as much as a parent. Like all of that stuff was true, whether he lived with me or lived with his dad, but then he was choosing to live with his dad. And that was not something that I had planned for. And the grief of that was profound for me. But I also am recognizing that the grief of realizing that being rejected by this family and their kids and being seen as manipulative and trying to get people to help me at the time. And that was like I was a big victim or something like that, which was a very ungenerous way of looking at how I was coming across at the time. I'm sure I was broken. We were both broken as we split. So like, what? It really pissed me off. I'm not going to lie. I got angry. Like that was the stage of grief that showed up for me as I had that pang and I'm reading this Facebook post. Like I want to pettily write in the comments, yeah, guess how you would feel if your kid was also moving in with his other parent? Because I know this person would know what I was referring to, right? Like I wanted to zinger and tell this person like, see, you didn't even appreciate how much shit I was going through at that stage of my life. And instead chose to have this ungenerous idea of who and what I was and the decisions I was making at a really awful time during my life. So great. Glad you have this perfect life and you're just, already grieving the developmental growth of your kiddo. But thanks a lot over here that you just like shit all over my parade, right? Like I really wanted to be petty. I had some choice words. I had some quick witted quips that I was going to put in there. And I held myself back. And if you do or don't hold yourself back when you have these moments, there are no wrong answers to this. Like quite literally, there are no wrong answers. So don't hear that. But I didn't quit back. I try not to do that on social media because there's just too much of that violence back and forth of opinions with anonymity of some kind. And I just don't want to participate in creating grief in the world. I think kindness goes a lot further and is where our efforts should be. So anyway, didn't respond, but did think about it and did kind of talk about it in my head and went through it. And here's what Dr. Natalie side of me, like my psychologist side, is unpacked. That was a huge grief for me at the time that I lost these friends, but I don't think that I completely appreciated all the grieving that I was doing. And one of the pieces that I grieved was that I was not heard and seen and understood. And I know as a woman in midlife that you have had similar experiences that, maybe you were not being generous in your presentation during a really difficult time in your life, but wouldn't it have been nice to have somebody validate and empathize and understand that experience rather than to be judgmental? It would have been nice, right? It really would have. And I had to reckon with the fact that it doesn't help me to try and be quick-witted. It doesn't help me to over-explain myself, in a way that the quip of, yeah, and you didn't have to say goodbye and have that child go to another parent's household is a way of me trying to get my story in front of this person again and have them reckon with their misjudgment of me earlier, years ago, 8-9 years ago, and reconcile that, right? I need almost I need them to validate my experience now. I'm trying again. I'm fishing to reel that back in. I think the defense mechanism of being petty about it has a lot to do with that. And if you notice yourself in those petty moments doing some of this over explaining of yourself, that might be a similar thing for you. And I don't think that's uncommon for us ladies in midlife. I just don't. I think that a lot of the time we are trying to explain ourselves. We are trying to prove ourselves. We're trying to make ourselves relevant at this stage in our life. And we are also wrestling with the regrets of a life of adulthood that we didn't adult well. We weren't perfect, and none of us are. So I could hear and feel all of that as I'm looking at this through my psychologist lens towards myself and what my impulse was. And I was reminded of a statement that I heard somebody say on a podcast recently about, even though your whole life revolves around what these roles are. So for me, we're talking about motherhood, or even being a wife and divorcing. Like, even though our lives might be wrapped around that in those moments or for a time, our self is not wrapped around. Our personhood, our who we are, our soul is not wrapped around that. So your life can revolve around your children and your marriage and your time of life in your 30s and 40s, but it doesn't revolve around who you are as a person. Right? Who you are as a person is a separate thing altogether. And it is kind of the conduit between now, from 0 to 99.9 or whatever you get to in life. And who you are as a self is somebody to genuinely care and validate. And we don't do that by quipping on social media. We don't do that by jabbing at someone who has slighted us. We do that by setting boundaries with those people and saying, thank you for opting out of my life. You didn't appreciate me. So you don't get to be a part of this. You don't even get to know what that story is. That's a pretty profound story. One that I love to share here with you guys, my listeners, but not one that I need to make a point of reaching out to somebody from 9 years ago and try to get them to basically say, I'm sorry for misinterpreting things. No, they lost that chance a long time ago to have a relationship with the valued self that I am today and have always been. They don't get to see that. If they couldn't see it, they're not going to get to see it. I'm not going to give them that chance. I have that boundary now around me, right? You've demonstrated where your small-mindedness could take you, and I misinterpreted the depth of that relationship. But once I got new information, okay, now I know. Now I know, and I know enough to know that I'm not putting any time or effort into this, including taking up a bunch of space in my head about the ways that I could come back to zing you because you zinged me almost a decade ago. I hope that something in this story helps you at this stage in your life, because I know that these places, these times, they're happening to you. The regrets, the recognizing that something has, you could have made different choices in your past. You wish you could have. You want to over-explain yourself to somebody. The missed opportunities where others just basically showed you they don't know who you are. And apparently they're not putting any effort into figuring it out. Don't spend 1 ounce of your effort trying to prove it to them. Not worth it. 8 billion souls live on this earth. Billions of us have come before this, and billions of us will come after. You don't need to take time with that one person and try to prove it. Walk away. If there's one sacred choice that we can be making in our midlife as women to have this centered midlife, it's to be fiercely protective of this self that we are, this person who we are. Fiercely protective of who we expose ourselves to, who we let into our lives, who we let back in to our lives, how we let them back in. It's okay to have a slip and feel petty and have a pang of, feelings, anger for me, sadness and anger. It was weird. I was just reading it and I was like, yeah, I totally remember that with my son. And then I remembered, and you were there. And that pisses me off that you didn't recognize the other layer of pain that I was in, because I wasn't going to be able to experience high school with that high schooler living in my house full time. It's going to live in the other house full time. And never had I ever had that happen or anticipated it. That person doesn't deserve that explanation. They decided what they thought of me then, which wasn't me. And I'm not going to take that personally. I'm going to see that as their small-mindedness, their need for, control in their life to see things a certain way. And when I departed from what their idea of me was, then they had to make up a story about how awful I was to make that nice and neat for themselves. Great. I'm done. Like, done over there. And I don't bring this to you because it's weighing on me or bothering me. I seriously just it was a fleeting moment, read it, wanted to quit, didn't, got angry, thought it through and reflected and thought, I'm going to bring this to the podcast because I know this is the experience that some of you are having out there during this stage of life. And I just want to normalize it and help you have maybe one other way of looking at it that helps you to step into a centered midlife by fiercely protecting your energy, fiercely protecting your personhood, fiercely protecting who has access to you. That's your sacred yes to yourself, right? You are 1 in 8 billion, quite literally. 1 in billions and billions when you think of all the billions of people who have come before us and all that will come after us, because no one else will uniquely ever be your soul, ever be you again. That's unbelievable when you think about it. And so worth fighting for, so worth figuring out at this stage in our midlife how to show up for ourselves and keep protecting fiercely the energy that we want to hold for ourselves. This is our time. This is our life, right? The role, we might have had to wrap our lives around all of those things in our pasts, but we don't now. And it never defined who we were as a person. We define who we are. We define and we redefine as we continue to age and live in this wonderful, centered midlife. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these 2 crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.